with that down, let's talk about this, shall we? You know, probably many of you guys have heard about this story in the last 24 hours. For those of you who don't know, in late 2023, a woman and her husband went to a Disney park in Florida. And as a result of eating food there that contained things she was allergic to, she ended up dying. Now, the widower is suing a bunch of people, including Disney, for the wrongful death. And Disney, at least if you just look at the headlines that have been out there, Disney is trying to get away with it because they say that when you signed up for Disney Plus, wait a minute, what? Disney Plus? Yep. Because you signed up for Disney Plus, the terms of service in you signing up for Disney Plus, and by the way, and Justice for All in the live chat is saying he's only suing for $50,000. No, he is not. That is a rabid piece of misinformation going around. We're going to address that in a minute. But because you signed up to Disney Plus, our terms of service says you don't get to sue us for anything. And I thought when I saw how much misinformation and partial information was being spread around out there, I thought we should probably take a minute and discuss this and break it down so you can understand what is going on and what is not going on. Now, before we get started, let me up top say what those of you who have watched me for any period of time know. Fuck Disney is generally my mantra in life. I'm a fan of many of their movies. Absolutely I am. But as far as Disney Park, if I found out today that Disneyland burned to the ground, I would be more than happy to walk to Anaheim tomorrow so I can piss on the charred remains.
Oh my God.
Okay. I'm not saying you're a fool if you give your money to Disney by going to Disneyland. I just think it's one of the most foolish things you can do. I myself will go once in a while because it makes my wife happy. And my desire to make my wife happy exceeds my utter disdain for all things Disneyland, Disney parks, Disney events, whatever. So just to put that out there, everybody knows where I'm coming from. But if we collectively are going to get mad at stuff, I want to make sure we're getting mad at the right things. So I want us to take a look and fully understand what is going on and what isn't going on with this wrongful death lawsuit. This is the things we're going to go over. Number one, first we're going to look at what happened. Okay, we're going to get the details of what actually happened. Number two, we're going to talk about arbitration and why Disney thinks the Disney Plus terms of service should make them go to arbitration. Number three, there's another arbitration terms of service that they agree to called the My Disney Experiences, which is what they use to buy their tickets to Disneyland. That's a separate thing. We're going to cover that. And then number four, we're going to talk about Disney's actual defense. Because Disney's defense is not that you signed up for Disney Plus. That's not their defense. We're going to talk about what their actual defense is. And then ultimately, I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen here. All right? You with me? Now listen, let me also say this up front. I'm going to do this video, and I want you to understand I'm doing this as a film pundit, okay? I am not doing this as an expert in American law. I am not doing this video as somebody who used to work in law. I am completely doing this as a film pundit and giving you information that is the best to my understanding, okay? I'm not giving legal advice. I just want to be very, very clear about that. Okay. Let's look first at the horrible tragedy that happened. This comes to us from CNN. In October of 2023, Kanukpar Tangswan, and I know I'm probably mispronouncing her name. I think I got it close to right there. So forgive me if I mispronounced it. Her husband, Jeffrey Piccolo, and Piccolo's mother dined at Raglan Road Irish Pub in Disney Springs, which is a part of the Walt Disney World Resort in Florida. For those of you who live in LA, the best I know how to compare it, if I'm not mistaken about this, is that Disney Springs is to Disney World kind of what downtown Disney is to Disneyland. If I understand it right. I believe I ate at Disney Springs one time at a Star Wars celebration. Anyway, they chose to eat at the restaurant, the lawsuit states, because they believed it would have proper safeguards against serving dairy and nuts to Tang Swan due to her allergies. The waiter guaranteed the couple that certain foods would be made allergen-free, which the two confirmed, quote unquote, several more times, according to the lawsuit. She also ordered a vegan fritter, scallops, onion rings, and a vegan shepherd's pie. Although some of the food delivered lacked allergen-free flags on the menu, the waiter again assured them that it was allergen-free. But after dinner, Tang Swan, 42 years old, a doctor, by the way, went shopping in the Disney Springs area and began suffering from severe acute allergic reaction, according to the lawsuit. Despite self-administering an EpiPen, Tang Swan died from, I always mispronounce this, anaphylaxis due to elevated levels of dairy and nut in her system, the lawsuit said, attributing the information to a medical examiner's investigation. Okay. I want to make sure that none of us, in the midst of all the outrage and all that kind of stuff, that none of us lose sight of what is the most important thing here. There was a tragedy. Mm-hmm. A woman who, thinking she was going out to have a marvelous time with her husband and her mother-in-law at a Disney World, ends up dying and lost her life. And this husband lost his wife. So I want us to always not lose focus of that. That's the main thing here. Okay. Now let's get into what all the outrage seems to be about. Because again, I perused some YouTube last night and even some news articles that I was shocked to see how badly they misunderstood what's happening here, and some really key important information that a lot of these outrage pieces are leaving out. Let's start with the thing that's getting everybody's attention. The husband, on behalf of his wife's estate, has now brought a lawsuit against several parties, including Disney, for the death of his wife. Disney, in their reply, is suggesting a couple of things. One, they're saying, as stupid as this sounds, that in the terms of service, for when Piccolo, the husband, years ago, signed up for a free trial of Disney Plus, didn't even get the service, just signed up for the free trial. Disney makes the argument that in the terms of service, and this is right from the court documents, any dispute, says Disney in the terms of service, between you and us, except for small claims court, is subject to a class action waiver and must be resolved by individual binding arbitration. Please read the arbitration provision in this agreement as it affects your rights under this contract. Okay, so one of the strands of spaghetti that Disney's lawyers were throwing out there to see if he could stick is to say, Your Honor, he signed up for Disney Plus. And in our terms of service, it says any dispute between you and us, and we're Disney, you agree does not go, you cannot bring a lawsuit. Instead, it's got to go to arbitration. Now, if you are sitting at home thinking that sounds ridiculous, you're goddamn right that's ridiculous. It's idiotic. One of the prime doctrines in all of law is often the test of what would a reasonable person believe, right? They teach that in law school. It's not the be-all, end-all, no. But it's often an implied thing. What would a reasonable person think, do, or believe? A reasonable person would believe that any terms of service that they were agreeing to using a certain service would apply exclusively to that service. Any common, rational, reasonable person, regardless of what you bury under Martin's mountains of small print, would assume that whatever they were agreeing to in the terms of service applied exclusively to Disney Plus. That is a reasonable thing. And trying to extend the coverage of that terms of service well beyond using a streaming service is asinine and idiotic. Now, I want you guys to follow me here. The word that's being thrown around a lot is arbitration. Disney is not trying to get off the hook by using arbitration. Arbitration is not a bad thing. Arbitration, in many cases, can be a very good thing. Forced arbitration, which goes beyond the scope of this video, but there's a distinction between forced arbitration and just arbitration in general. Forced arbitration comes out of the devil's butthole. Just arbitration in and of itself, though, can be a very good thing. There's advantages to arbitration. It saves the taxpayers money because it's not done in a court with a jury and with a judge and all that kind of stuff. It's usually done much quicker. It's much less expensive for the people involved. It moves along a lot faster. You mutually, both sides get to choose who the arbitrator is. And it basically says this. Arbitration becomes a binding thing. Let's say Ray and I have an argument over this bottle of aviation gin. Okay? The Deadpool variant of it. And instead of going to court and spending 2 years in court and wasting a lot of taxpayers' dollars on the court and wasting a lot of legal fees for having to pay a lawyer for 2 years, we decide, let's go to arbitration. You get your lawyer, I'll get my lawyer, we'll go to arbitration.
Let's do it.
Now, our lawyers together pick an arbitrator. And they think, you know what? Somebody who's an expert in this particular field and who knows the parties involved and who is a professional arbitrator, we all think Jonathan Voico. Our lawyers decide. They agree that Jonathan Voico would be a good arbitrator. So Jonathan Voico hears the facts that we bring. And then Jonathan Voico decides what he thinks is fair. Having an understanding of the topic, an understanding of what the issues are, the lawyers and we make our case to the arbitrator. The arbitrator makes a decision based on what they are fair. Now, sometimes if somebody's suing somebody else and you go to trial, you may get nothing. The jury may decide, no, we don't think the company's at fault. Whereas if you go to an arbitrator, you may not get everything you want, but an arbitrator may say, you know what's fair here? This is what would be fair. And so look, so arbitration can be good, arbitration could be bad. There's definitely advantages to it, some disadvantages. I just want to point out though, because a lot of people are presenting on YouTube and in other places that Disney is just quote unquote trying to get off scot-free. They're not. What they're trying to do is ridiculously so, but it is what it is. They're just trying to get it moved from a court to an arbitrator because there are advantages. It's still utterly ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
Right. The premise of because you did this, it has to go to arbitration is ridiculous. Oftentimes, these lawsuits do go into arbitration more often than not.
Oh yeah, listen. A lot of times, both parties think it's a good idea to go to arbitration. Again, forced arbitration, which is what this is another topic. I'm just saying. Don't think arbitration in and of itself means anybody's getting off scot-free, and don't think it's automatically a bad thing. It can be a good thing, but whatever here. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's episode, Miracle Made. Guys, it's hot outside, and your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. So if you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night night long. There are just so many things that make these sheets so fantastic. We already mentioned the self-cooling properties for better quality sleep, but they're also self-cleaning. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. So go to trymiracle.com/Campea. That's TRYMIRACLE.com/Campea to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code Campea at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. So upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Campea and use the code Campea to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Campea to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. The notion and the idea that Disney can say because some guy signed up for a free trial of Disney Plus, that can mean 4 years later when he goes to Florida and somebody dies, we're protected from being sued.
Right.
Like, that's ridiculous. And that's not going to go anywhere. Okay? That's not going to go anywhere. No judge is going to believe that this extends to that. It's not going to happen. So it's utterly ridiculous that they're even trying it. The second thing, which admittedly has a little bit more legitimacy, is we're moving from the Disney Plus terms of service now to another thing called the My Disney Experience terms of service. My Disney Experience is the thing that Piccolo used to buy the tickets to Disney World. And Disney's argument is that in the terms of service, when you bought tickets to come to Disney World, our terms of service default to our Disney terms of service, which means you got to go to arbitration. Now, this argument has a little bit more validity because unlike Disney Plus, which signing up to a free trial of Disney Plus has nothing to do with going to Disney World, using My Disney Experiences, which is all about going to Disney World and agreeing to the terms of service there, that becomes a little bit more legitimate of an argument that Disney can say. That Disney can say, hey, look, they used My Disney Experiences. They agreed to the terms of service of buying tickets to Disney World there. And part of the terms of service is, pardon me, guys, that we go to arbitration instead of to trial. Okay, but there's a problem. You see, in the terms of service of My Disney Experiences, it specifically says you can sue Disney. Reading the main paragraph here. This is in the My Disney Experiences terms of service. You agree that any claim, action, or lawsuit, collectively action, arising out of these terms, reservations and bookings and or all packages, products, and services provided in connection with the reservation and bookings, including without limitation components such as park administration, blah, 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 blah. Lighting interests, blah, blah, blah. Collectively, terms, reservations, and products must be filed and maintained exclusively in any court in Orange County, Florida. Having subject matter jurisdiction, you also hereby submit to the personal jurisdiction for such courts. Basically, the reason this one ain't going to work is because even though they say the My Disney Experiences terms of service also includes the general Disney terms of service, which calls for arbitration, the actual terms of service of My Disney Experiences contradicts the general Disney terms. The general Disney term says you can't sue us for anything, we got to go to arbitration, but the actual terms of service of My Disney Experience says, yup, you can sue us. It just says you got to sue us in Orange County, Florida. That's the only stipulation, which is, by the way, where Piccolo is filing his lawsuit. So is this thing about the Disney Plus terms of service going to hold up? No. I mean, I obviously don't know all the details, but from what I have in front of me, and there may be other things that I'm not aware of, but there's no way this gets granted. No way this gets granted. And then as far as the My Disney Experiences terms and conditions, sure, it refers to the general Disney terms and conditions, but the specific terms and conditions of My Disney Experience says that you can sue Disney as long as the lawsuit is filed in Orange County, Florida. And they've done that. So, number one, we had a horrible tragedy. Number two, Disney is, and remember, I could piss on their rotting grave for all I care, but Disney's not trying to get off scot-free. They're trying to get it moved to arbitration. Point four, their excuse for getting it to arbitration because you signed up to Disney Plus, I cannot see any judge granting that. And then the final point, Disney trying to use the My Disney Experiences terms of service also hurts them because it contradicts the general terms of service of Disney by saying, yes, you can sue us in Orange County, Florida. All right. But there is one big argument. There is one big piece of information that the vast majority of these angry, outrage, clickbait, well, it wasn't clickbait, but the angry outrage videos about Disney is evil and all this kind of stuff because of what they're doing here. There is one major piece of information most of those people are leaving out. And here's the piece of information they're leaving out. It wasn't Disney's restaurant. Where this tragedy happened wasn't Disney's restaurant. They don't own that restaurant, and they don't operate that restaurant. The restaurant leases property from Disney so they can have their business there in Disney Springs. But Disney does not own that restaurant, and Disney doesn't run the restaurant. They have nothing to do with what happens inside the restaurant. Disney put out a statement to explain why they were trying to get this move to arbitration, all that kind of stuff. The Disney official statement is this: we are deeply saddened by the family's loss and understand their grief. Given that this restaurant is neither owned or operated by Disney, we are merely trying to defend ourselves against the plaintiff's attorney's attempt to include us in their lawsuit against the restaurant. I think this is a very, very important piece of information that people aren't talking about. Because when you look at a lot of those articles and a lot of those outrages, people are saying it's a Disney restaurant that she died in. It wasn't a Disney restaurant that she died in. It was a restaurant called Ralligan Road Irish Pub that was independently owned and independently run. That is not run by Disney. It is not owned by Disney. But it is on their property.
Yeah, that's the question I have. Like,
now, here's where it gets complicated.
yeah, they're the property owners.
Because Disney did not own this restaurant and had nothing to do with running that restaurant and had nothing to do with that woman being given contaminated food with allergens, does that automatically mean Disney should get off scot-free? It's complicated. Because on one hand, they do own the property that this tragedy took place on, right? They do own the property that the tragedy took place on. And there is precedent in law where, under a similar circumstance, the owner of the property, again, under certain circumstances, can also be held liable.
Right.
And be responsible for damages.
Yeah. Not for the full extent, but yeah, there is
precedent
extend.
for that. However, there is also a lot of precedent when the owner of a property is not held liable. For example, let's take Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pretty close facsimile. Let's say Jonathan owns a house.
Yeah.
And he decides to rent it out on Airbnb. Ray rents the house.
I had a bad feeling about him.
For a weekend. Right? Ray decides to rent the house for the weekend. For a week, let's say. Now, Jonathan lays out rules. Hey, no loud noise after 11 o'clock at night out of courtesy to my neighbors.
No ketamine parties.
No ketamine party. No big parties at all. Like, don't damage anything.
Right.
They set out rules and regulations. So Jonathan leaves. Ray rents the house. And the first thing Ray does, as Ray will do, he buys 5 grams of Coke and 3 hookers to come over to the house. Then he gives bad cocaine to one of the hookers, and the hooker ODs and dies. The question is, will the sex worker's parents have a case to make against Jonathan because Jonathan owned the house? Generally speaking, in law, in the cases that have come up regarding situations like this, where an Airbnb, somebody rents out their house to Airbnb and a person who rents the house breaks laws there or, harms somebody, generally speaking, the house owner is not held liable. I read this, unless, generally, I brought this up. Generally, if a renter of an Airbnb house breaks the law or is liable for other incidents, the owner of the property is not directly liable for the renter's illegal actions. The liability typically depends on the following factors. Did Jonathan know Ray was breaking the law? If Jonathan knew Ray was having coke parties and bringing over sex workers, then Jonathan could be held reliable.
Yeah, what if he gave me the black book of the...
Here's where you get all the best sex workers, Ray.
Yeah,
this is where you get all the best cocaine, right?
Yeah.
Now, if Jonathan knew that was happening, that's different. Or...
I just set it on the table. I'm just saying, this is just here. That's all I'm saying.
Or... Jonathan can be held liable if he did nothing to screen who his upcoming renter was. Like if he didn't even bother to look that, Ray's middle name was I love coke and whores. Right? But if he does, he looks at the credit score.
Okay, it raised a red flag, but...
Yeah, it raised a red flag.
I moved on.
But he looked at the credit score. He looked at, was there any past incident of history with Airbnb rentals with Ray? If he did all that, he's fine. So basically speaking, are there times that the property owner can be held liable? Yes, depending on the circumstances. Are there times when the property owner is not held liable because of the actions of somebody else who's renting the property does? Yes, depending on the circumstances. So again, Disney's defense here is not that, nah, you signed up for Disney Plus. That's our defense. That's not their defense. Their defense is whether or not it works or not. We'll wait and see. Disney's claim here is that we don't own the restaurant that this tragedy happened in. We didn't run the restaurant that this tragedy happened in. We're landlords. We own that property, but these other people, the Irish pub, they own their restaurant. They run the restaurant.
Sure, blame it
they're
on
the
the
ones
Irish.
who had allergens in food that wasn't supposed to be there. And therefore, we don't think we're going to use any legal maneuvering we can to try to arrange it that we go to arbitration with this poor widower instead of being dragged into a lawsuit and being included in the lawsuit with that restaurant that we had nothing to do with. Now, again, here's the thing. We don't know everything. If we find out that several complaints had been made to Disney that, hey, one of the restaurants on your property, I had an allergic reaction. I got hospitalized. If we find out that there are 3 or 4 or 5 cases of that and Disney knew about it and still let that restaurant operate, absolutely Disney can be held liable. If they knew that the people they were leasing that space to was doing things dangerously, like claiming they had no allergens in their food, but people with allergies were getting sick at their restaurant. If Disney knew that, and if that's, and by the way, we don't know if that's the case or not, but if they did, Disney screwed. Disney screwed. And they should be. But if they didn't, if there hasn't been any reports of people having allergic reactions to food that is supposed to be allergen free in that restaurant, if Disney has never received a report saying that this tenant on their property is doing anything but being an upstanding business and running business perfectly and running their business however the hell, I don't know how they get held liable. I don't know. So, is the excuse they're trying to use to get out of the trial and into arbitration because of the Disney Plus terms of service idiotic? Absolutely. 100%. It's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and there's no way a judge is going to grant that. Is the other thing about the My Disney Experiences terms of service. That one's a little bit more complicated, but even in the terms of service of My Disney Experiences, it says you can sue Disney as long as it's in Orange County, Florida. So will this get moved to arbitration? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Does Disney get found liable here, considering it's not their restaurant? They don't own it. They didn't do it. They had nothing to do with that poor woman getting poisoned, basically. I don't know. I really hate Disneyland. And I really think they're a giant ripoff that does nothing. I think they're predators that prey on consumers and steal as much money from people as they can. And I don't think anybody should ever go to Disneyland or Disney World or any live Disney event. That's my personal feelings. But I want to make sure when we get mad for the right things. Disney's not trying to get out of this lawsuit, period, and get off scot-free because of a Disney Plus thing. They're simply trying to use that as a mechanism to get to arbitration because they don't own the restaurant and they don't operate the restaurant and they had nothing to do with that poor lady getting poisoned. And if we find out that they did know there were problems with that restaurant, if we find out that other people did get sick at that restaurant and Disney did nothing to stop them from operating their business there, then that becomes another issue altogether. And it very well could happen. I'm sure Piccolo's lawyers are looking into that right now. So we'll see how it all comes up. Again, let's be mad, but let's be mad at the right things. Mr. I is saying, John, does the restaurant have allergen warnings up as well? From what I understand in the lawsuit, the restaurant actually advertised, we are an allergen safe restaurant.
Oh, man.
And we have a number of items on our menu that are specifically for people with allergies.
Whoops.
Now, again, according to the lawsuit, they did order a couple things off the menu that did not say no allergens.
Right.
But they confirmed with the waiter, who assured them multiple times that there was no dairy and no nuts in the dishes that he specified to them were allergen free, and they did have the allergens in them, and she died. So this restaurant needs to get sued out of existence. Now, one other thing I want to touch on is somebody mentioned earlier that the guy, why is the guy only suing them for $50,000? He is not only suing them for $50,000. He is suing them for a threshold of $50,000. All that means is, because certain cases take on a different nature depending on what the monetary value of the thing is, he's only specifying in the lawsuit that this is going to be for a threshold of it's going to be more than $50,000. Now, what the actual number will end up being will probably come more as later on. It's probably going to be in the millions of dollars. But the $50,000 is just a threshold. So just be clear, he is not only suing them for $50,000 or for the death of his wife. It's going to be for a lot more than that. Just want to make sure that that's clear. Anyway, guys, this is a horrible tragedy and a horrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the things I liken this onto, Ray and I were talking about this earlier. If Ray got dropped off here to work today and found out remembered that he had to go to the post office and asked me if he could use my car. And I said, yeah, you can use my car to go to the post office. But on the way to the post office, Ray stopped at Applebee's, had 5 whiskey shots, and then continued on his way to the post office, only he hit somebody and killed them. Am I responsible for that? I mean, it's my car. But did I do anything wrong? Did I actually do something wrong by lending Ray my car when he was not drunk?
Yeah, you gave me your Applebee's gift card.
I gave you the Applebee's gift card.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Let's forget that.
So,
Right.
anyway,
No, I don't want to make light of this situation. It's kind of...
you gave me the Applebee's gift card. What did you expect me to do? It's a $20 Applebee's gift card. Anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? I mean, once you get past the obvious, ridiculous thing of the idea of we're not guilty of anything because you signed up to Disney Plus. Well, once you get past that, and that is completely ridiculous. But once you get past that, what do you think about this situation? It's far more complicated than I think people want to make it out to be. A lot of people are trying to make this out to be a real simple thing. Disney killed this woman, and now they're trying to get off. And as much as I hate Disneyland and Disney, it's not exactly what's going on here. I don't know. How do you see this? What do you think is ultimately going to be the outcome here? What do you think would be a fair outcome for everybody involved? Whatever you guys think, and understanding there's probably a lot to all this we still don't know and understand. Jump on down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.